Melamine adulteration today. Last week I learned the USA is still flagging food imports for melamine adulteration on a regular basis. Intrigued, I jumped into the FDA import refusals database to figure out what was going on. Sure enough, last year the US refused imports for 261 foods on suspicion of melamine adulteration. By comparison, the European Union's Food Safety Alert System flagged no foods for melamine adulteration. Reminder, melamine is an industrial chemical that contains significant quantities of nitrogen and can be purchased as a whitish powder. It's been used as an adulterant by food fraud perpetrators to boost the apparent protein content of foods like milk and wheat gluten, most famously in the Chinese infant formula scandal of 2008 and the US pet food recalls of 2007. The high nitrogen content in melamine allows it to trick the laboratory test traditionally used to quantify the amount of proteins in food, the Kjeldahl method, which is based on the fact that most nitrogen in food is present in the form of protein. Foods which are priced according to their protein content, such as milk, milk powder, gluten, and other plant-based proteins like pea powder, are vulnerable to adulteration with melamine and other nitrogen-containing industrial chemicals. Melamine doesn't just present a food fraud risk, there are food safety implications for adulteration with melamine due to its toxicity. The Chinese infant formula and pet food problems of 2007 and 2008 only came to light after significant numbers of infants and pets were afflicted with kidney damage caused by the adulteration. More than 300,000 infants in the case of the tainted milk powder. With melamine being so well known as the potential adulterant in fraud-affected foods, are food fraud perpetrators really still using it in food destined for the United States? Well, it seems so, although the true extent is murky. Here's what's on the public record. In 2024, there were 261 foods refused entry to the USA by the US FDA because they contained or appeared to contain melamine. Specifically, the article appears to contain a food additive, namely melamine and/or melamine analog, that is unsafe within the meaning of Section 409. Those foods were found within 81 shipments from 71 manufacturers, all from China. 62 foods were affected, including foods that could reasonably be imagined to contain melamine-like adulterants, such as fluid milk, dried milk, pet food, bakery products, rice protein, soybean flour or meal or powder, and vegetable proteins. Other foods that were refused entry seemed less likely to be vulnerable to melamine adulteration, including in-shell pecans, fruit-flavoured soft drinks, and black tea. I'm not sure why the FDA would flag such products for appearing to contain melamine. Notably, most of the foods were refused entry without testing. Just 5 of the 261 foods refused for melamine violations had been tested at the time of the refusal. One item, described mysteriously as meat/poultry/seafood flavoured foods NEC baked, was marked yes for FDA sample analysis, while just 4 other items, cakes and baked potato snacks, were marked yes for private lab analysis. So what gives? The US FDA is allowed to refuse imports based on reasonable suspicion or preliminary evidence, including prior findings and documentation without laboratory confirmation, and appears to be adulterated is a legal threshold in the FDCA, that's the Food, Drugs and Cosmetic Act. Although the FDA publishes a record of each refused food, there is little information about the reason for the refusals. Each record contains information about the shipment, manufacturer, date, and where the testing was done, plus the food type and violation code, for example, melamine, accompanied by the charge statement. The description of the charge is generic, so something like appears to contain or appears to bear or contain a food additive, namely melamine and/or a melamine analog, and it doesn't reveal how this conclusion was reached. While some might be tempted to blame the current political climate in the US for import refusals of Chinese foods, the data I interrogated was from 2024, which predates the present administration. Conclusions. At least 5 of the 261 foods from China refused import to the US in 2024 on the basis of possible melamine adulteration were tested by the FDA or private laboratories and found to contain melamine or melamine analog. At least we assume that's the case because the details are not published. There were 62 types of foods among those refused entry, including bakery products, snack foods, beverages, fluid milks, dried milks, ice cream, yogurt, breakfast cereals, pecan nuts, pet food, rice protein, soybean flour or meal or powder or protein powder, and other vegetable proteins. If your company purchases any of these foods or ingredients from China, be alert to potential adulteration with melamine or melamine-like chemicals, as this is a reasonably foreseeable hazard in such foods from that country. In short, melamine has been used as an adulterant by food fraud perpetrators for boosting the apparent protein content in certain foods. Melamine adulteration poses food safety risks. The US refused imports of 261 foods because they potentially contained melamine or melamine analogues in 2024. All were from China. Few of the refused foods were tested prior to refusal. Reasons for import refusals aren't included in public record beyond appears to contain. And purchases of bakery products, snack foods, beverages, fluid milk, dried milk, ice cream, yogurt, breakfast cereals, pecan nuts, pet food, rice protein, soybean flour meal powder or protein powder, or other vegetable proteins from China should be aware of possible adulteration with melamine and melamine analogues. Source. The data in this article was obtained by interrogating a database downloaded from the US FDA. There is a link to that in the email and the post. And if you'd like to jump into my analyses or dive into individual records, you can download my Excel file, which I created from the US FDA downloads, by clicking the download button in the email and the post.